The first thing I remember is the sound my father made. It wasn't a word. It was something between a gasp and a groan, like the air had been punched out of his chest. He was sitting on a wooden bench in the back of the hearing room at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and his hands gripped the edge of the seat so hard his knuckles went white. My mother was beside him. She didn't move at all. She just stared at me with her mouth slightly open, like she was watching someone walk back from the dead. I hadn't seen either of them in 9 years. I was wearing my army dress blues, captain's bars on my shoulders, combat medical badge pinned above my ribbons, 2 deployment patches on my right sleeve. Everything my brother told them I'd never earn was stitched into that uniform. Kyle sat at the front table next to his defense counsel. When he turned and saw me, his face went completely blank. Not surprised, not angry, just empty, like a man watching a wall he built for 9 years collapse in real time. But to understand how we ended up in that room, I have to take you back to a place most people drive past without noticing. A town about 40 minutes south of Macon called Ridgewood. Ridgewood, Georgia is the kind of town where the same families fill the same church pews every Sunday. My father, Frank Holloway, ran the only auto repair shop on Main Street for 30 years. He opened at 6 every morning, came home smelling like motor oil, and never once complained about it. My mother, Linda, kept the house running like clockwork. Breakfast by 7, laundry folded before noon. Pot roast every Wednesday because my father said it reminded him of his own mother's cooking. We went to First Baptist on Sundays. My mother sang in the choir. My father sat in the 3rd row and pretended the sermon wasn't putting him to sleep. The American flag out front got replaced every 4th of July, even if the old one still looked fine. My brother Kyle was 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the center of gravity in our family. Pitcher on the high school baseball team. Tall, easy smile, the kind of kid coaches loved because he made everyone around him look better. Teachers called him a natural leader. Neighbors told my parents how lucky they were. And they were proud, genuinely proud. You could hear it every time my father introduced him. "This is my son, Kyle." When he said it, his voice changed, got a little louder, a little warmer, like he was showing off something he built with his own hands. I was different, not unhappy, just quieter. I liked science class and long runs before school. I kept my room organized the way some people keep a garden, everything in its place. When Kyle was out at parties on Friday nights, I was usually reading or helping my mother fold laundry. I didn't resent him for being the favorite. That's just how it was. Some families have a son, and everyone else orbits around it. By the time I was 17, I knew I wanted to join the Army. Not because I hated Ridgewood. I loved it. But I wanted to be useful in a bigger way. I wanted to learn things I couldn't learn in a town with 1 stoplight and a Dairy Queen. When I told my parents at dinner one night, the table went quiet. My mother set down her fork. "The Army?" "Yes, ma'am. I want to be a combat medic." My father leaned back in his chair and studied me the way he studied an engine he wasn't sure about yet. "Why a medic?" "Because I want to save people," I said. "And I want to prove I can handle hard things." Kyle laughed from across the table. "Basic training's gonna eat you alive, Meg." "Maybe," I said. "But I'd rather find out than wonder." My father nodded slowly. "Just don't quit." I never forgot that sentence. I shipped out to Fort Jackson, South Carolina 3 months after graduation. Basic training was exactly what I expected. Loud, exhausting, designed to break down everything you thought you knew about yourself and rebuild it from scratch. Some people hated it. I didn't. The structure felt natural to me. Wake up, work hard, do it again. For the first time in my life, nobody cared that I was quiet. They cared that I was reliable. I wrote home every week. My mother wrote back long letters about the church bake sale and who got married. My father's letters were short, 2 or 3 lines. "Proud of you, kid." Kyle sent a text once that said "good luck" with a thumbs up emoji. That was about right for him. Then around the 5th week, everything changed. I tried calling home on a Sunday evening. No answer. I figured they were at church. I called again Monday. Nothing. I left a voicemail. "Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Hope everyone's doing good. Love you." A week passed. No response. I called again. This time, my mother answered. Her voice sounded strange, flat. "Mom? It's Megan." A long pause. "Honey," she said quietly, "you don't have to pretend." "Pretend what?" Kyle told us what happened. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She sighed like she'd been dreading this conversation. He said they sent you home, that you had a breakdown during training and they released you. He said you were too embarrassed to tell us yourself. The words didn't make sense. I stood there in the hallway of the barracks holding the phone, trying to process what I'd just heard. Mom, that's not true. I'm standing in my barracks right now. I'm still in training. Silence. Mom, I said again. I didn't leave. I'm here. I'm doing well. Another pause. Then she said something that stayed with me for years. Kyle wouldn't make that up, Megan. He's your brother. The call ended a few minutes later. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember staring at the gray wall and feeling like the floor had shifted beneath me. I told myself it was a misunderstanding. Families sort things out. I'd go home on leave and explain everything face to face. 8 weeks later, I got my first leave. I drove 6 hours straight back to Ridgewood. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. White siding, green shutters, the same wind chime on the porch my mother hung when I was 12. I knocked. My mother opened the door halfway. She looked tired. Mom, I need to talk to you and Dad. She glanced behind her. Your father's resting. It's important. She hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. My father appeared in the hallway. He looked at me the way you look at someone you're disappointed in but don't want to fight with. I tried to explain. I pulled out my training documents, my evaluation scores, a letter from my drill sergeant. My father shook his head slowly. Kyle said they give those out even when people wash out, to let them down easy. That's not how it works, Dad. He folded his arms. We already talked to your brother about this. He said you'd try to cover it up, said you'd have paperwork that looked real. That sentence knocked the wind out of me. Kyle had preemptively discredited everything I could show them. He'd built the lie with a back door. I looked at my mother. Mom, please, call Fort Jackson. Ask them. They'll tell you I'm still active. My mother's eyes were wet, but her voice was firm. We're not going to embarrass you by calling the army, Megan. Just come home when you're ready to be honest. I drove back that night. 6 hours in the dark, no radio, just the highway and the weight of what had happened. 3 months later, I tried again. I called home on Christmas Eve. My mother answered. Before I could speak, she said, Megan, your father and I love you, but we can't keep doing this. When you're ready to tell the truth, we're here. I said, Mom, I just got promoted. I'm a private first class now. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, I wish that were true, honey. And she hung up. After that, I wrote letters. I included my unit address, my official Army return address, photos of me in uniform at the base. One year I had my company commander, Captain Ellis, write a short note confirming my active service. My mother sent it back with a handwritten note that said, Please stop. This is hurting your father. That was the last time I tried. Something inside me didn't break after that. It just went quiet, like a door closing softly instead of slamming. I stopped expecting them to believe me. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring, and I did what the Army taught me to do when life gets complicated. I focused on the mission. My first real assignment after training was with a forward support medical company at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The work was demanding. Long shifts, trauma simulations, endless drills preparing for deployment. But I was good at it. The same steadiness that made me invisible in Ridgewood made me valuable in the Army. Holloway doesn't rattle, one of my supervisors wrote in an evaluation. Keeps her head when everyone else loses theirs. Within 2 years, I deployed to Afghanistan. Helmand Province. The kind of place that tests everything you think you know about fear and calm. I worked as a flight medic on a Black Hawk crew, treating casualties during medevac operations. Some nights, the helicopter barely touched the ground before we were pulling wounded soldiers onto stretchers. There was no time to panic. You assessed. You stabilized. You moved. I lost patience. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You do everything right, and sometimes it's still not enough. But I also saved people who shouldn't have survived. A sergeant with shrapnel wounds that should have killed him in the field. A young specialist who lost a leg but kept his life because we got to him 7 minutes faster than protocol expected. When I came home from that deployment, I had a combat medical badge and a commendation letter from the battalion commander. I was 24 years old. I sent a copy of the commendation to Ridgewood. No response. Around my 4th year in the Army, I applied for the Green to Gold program, a path that lets enlisted soldiers earn a commission as officers. It meant going back to school while staying in the Army. I finished my degree in 18 months. The day I was commissioned as a second lieutenant, I stood at attention while the gold bar was pinned to my shoulder. It was a small ceremony. A few fellow soldiers clapped. My company commander shook my hand. That night I sat alone in my apartment off base and wished my parents had been there. Then I folded that feeling up, put it away, and got back to work. 2 years after my commission, I met Ryan. Ryan Park was an Army helicopter pilot with 10 years of flight time and the calmest voice I'd ever heard on a radio. We crossed paths during a joint training exercise at Fort Campbell. He was running pilot briefings for a medevac unit, and I was the medical liaison assigned to coordinate with his crew. The first real conversation we had was in the chow hall. I was eating alone, staring at a tray of food I wasn't particularly interested in. He sat down across from me without asking. "You're the medic who chewed out a staff sergeant for skipping the pre-flight medical checklist," he said. I looked up. He had a bad checklist. Ryan smiled. I heard it was very thorough chewing. That was how it started. Ryan was easy to be around. He didn't push me to talk about things I wasn't ready to share. He understood military life in a way civilians never quite can. The long separations, the uncertainty, the way you learn to hold people loosely because the next deployment is always around the corner. We got married at a small ceremony on base 14 months later. A chaplain, a few close friends, paper plates, and a grocery store cake. I mailed an invitation to Ridgewood. Nobody came. 2 years later, our daughter Lily was born. She had Ryan's dark hair and my stubbornness. The first time I held her, everything in the world rearranged itself. Every deployment, every sleepless night, every letter that went unanswered, all of it suddenly led to this small, warm, impossible person in my arms. I wrote one more letter to Ridgewood. Inside was a photo of Lily wrapped in a yellow blanket, eyes squeezed shut, tiny fist curled against her cheek. I wrote 4 words on the back. "You have a granddaughter." I waited 6 weeks. Nothing came back. I didn't write again. The years kept moving. Lily grew. Ryan and I juggled deployments and parenting schedules with the same careful coordination the Army requires for everything. I deployed again, this time to Iraq, shorter rotation, but no less intense. When I came home, Lily ran across the tarmac and slammed into my legs so hard I almost fell over. By my 8th year of service, I had earned a promotion to captain. The ceremony took place on a warm morning at Fort Stewart. Ryan stood beside me in his flight suit. Lily sat in the front row, swinging her legs and whispering loudly to the officer next to her that her mom was getting new shiny things on her shoulders. When the captain's bars were pinned, I felt the weight of them. Not physical weight, something heavier. The weight of every choice that brought me there. Every night in Helmand, every patient I carried off a helicopter, every letter that was never answered. After the ceremony, Lily saluted me very seriously. "Captain Mommy," she said. I laughed and picked her up. Later that night, I sat on the back porch of our house and imagined my parents in the audience. My father pretending he wasn't emotional. My mother taking photos with her phone held sideways. They had missed all of it. Not because I failed, because someone they trusted told them I had. Then, about a year later, a file landed on my desk that changed everything. I was reviewing medical incident reports for a training exercise that had gone wrong at Fort Stewart. A National Guard unit conducting a field exercise had a vehicle accident during a nighttime convoy. 3 soldiers were injured, 2 seriously. The investigation centered on whether proper safety protocols had been followed before the convoy moved. I was the senior medical officer assigned to provide the medical assessment for the inquiry. Standard procedure. I opened the investigation file and began reading the personnel roster for the Guard unit involved. The name hit me like a wall. Sergeant First Class Kyle Holloway, Georgia Army National Guard. My brother. I sat there staring at the screen. Kyle had joined the Guard about 5 years after I enlisted. I never knew. Ridgewood might as well have been on another planet. But there it was. His name, his rank, his unit. The file told the story clearly. Kyle had been the convoy commander that night. The pre-movement safety checklist required a vehicle inspection and a medical readiness confirmation before departure. According to the investigation, neither was completed. Kyle had signed off on both anyway. When the lead vehicle rolled over a drainage ditch that should have been flagged during route reconnaissance, 3 soldiers paid the price. It wasn't malice. It was negligence. But in the Army, negligence during operations isn't a small thing. People get hurt. People die. The investigation was headed toward a formal hearing under Article 15, non-judicial punishment that could end his Guard career. My commanding officer, Colonel Harris, called me into his office the next morning. Harris was a tall woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that made you trust her immediately. "Holloway," she said. "The convoy incident investigation." "Yes, ma'am." She studied my face. "The convoy commander. He's your brother." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded slowly. "You're listed as the medical assessment lead. Your report on the injured soldiers and whether proper medical readiness procedures were followed is critical to this hearing." "I understand." Harris leaned forward. "I can reassign you. No questions asked. Nobody would blame you." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to walk away from the whole thing. 9 years of silence. 9 years of a lie I never deserved. And now the Army was asking me to sit in the same room as the person who caused all of it. But another part of me, the part that had survived Helmand and Iraq and every empty mailbox in between, understood something the rest of me was still catching up to. The truth doesn't care about your feelings. It just needs someone willing to say it out loud. "I'll provide my assessment," I said. "The facts are the facts." Harris nodded once. "Your parents may attend the hearing. Family often does for Guard personnel." That sentence landed harder than anything else, she said. "The week before the hearing," I told Ryan, "we were sitting on the back porch after Lily went to bed. The Georgia night was warm and thick with the sound of crickets. My brother's unit is under investigation," I said. Ryan set down his coffee. "Your brother?" "Yes. The brother who told your parents you washed out of the Army." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How are you feeling about it?" "I don't know yet." Ryan nodded. Then he said something I carried with me into that hearing room. "You've spent 9 years proving who you are. You don't need to prove anything in that room. Just tell the truth." The morning of the hearing, I woke up before dawn. Old Army habit. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and buttoned my dress blues slowly. The ribbons across my chest told a story that spanned nearly a decade. Afghanistan, Iraq, the Combat Medical Badge, the Meritorious Service Medal, each one a chapter in a life my parents never saw. Lily wandered into the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, you look fancy." I smiled. "Just going to work, baby." She gave me a hug and shuffled back toward her room. Ryan appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and nodded. The hearing room at Fort Stewart was plain, functional. Folding tables, metal chairs, an American flag in the corner. The kind of room where the Army handles its business without ceremony. I arrived early. I sat at the medical assessment table near the front, organized my documents, and waited. Officers filtered in. The investigating officer took his position. The legal counsel for both sides arranged their notes. Then I heard footsteps behind me and the low murmur of civilian voices. I didn't turn around right away. I finished organizing the folder in front of me. Then, slowly, I looked toward the back of the room. My parents were sitting 3 rows behind me. My father looked older. His hair had gone mostly gray, and his shoulders had a slight forward curve they didn't have 9 years ago. My mother was smaller than I remembered. She wore a pale blue cardigan and clutched her purse in her lap with both hands. They hadn't seen me yet. Their eyes were fixed on Kyle, who sat near the front in his Guard dress uniform. He looked tired. The golden boy from Ridgewood had lines around his eyes now, and the confidence he used to wear like a Letterman jacket seemed thinner. The investigating officer called the hearing to order. Everyone shifted in their seats, and that's when my mother's gaze drifted toward the front table. Our eyes met. Her hand flew to her mouth. The exact same gesture people make when they see something they can't explain. She grabbed my father's arm. He turned, saw me, and went completely still. The captain's bars, the ribbons, the combat medical badge, the deployment patches. 9 years of service written across a uniform they were told I never earned. I held their gaze for one steady breath. Then I turned back to face the front of the room, because I had a job to do. The hearing proceeded. The investigating officer reviewed the timeline of the convoy incident. Witnesses testified about the conditions that night, the missing safety checks, the accident itself. The two seriously injured soldiers were still recovering. One had a spinal fracture. The other had lost partial use of his left hand. When my turn came, I stood and delivered my medical assessment calmly. I described the injuries. I explained what proper pre-movement medical readiness checks would have flagged, including a driver with a documented vision issue that should have removed him from nighttime convoy duty. I explained that the medical readiness checklist Kyle signed was never actually completed. I stated facts. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at Kyle while I spoke. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. During a recess, I stepped into the hallway to get water. My parents were standing near the vending machines. They looked like two people who had walked into the wrong building and couldn't find the exit. My mother spoke first. Her voice cracked on the first word. Megan. It wasn't a question. It was disbelief wrapped in a name. Hi, Mom. She stared at my uniform. The bars, the ribbons. Her eyes moved across every pin and patch like she was reading a language she didn't know existed. You're a captain, she whispered. Yes, ma'am. My father stepped closer. His jaw was tight. How long? He asked. I've been in the army for 9 years, Dad. I never left. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. His voice came out rough. Kyle said they discharged you. I know what Kyle said. My mother sat down heavily on the hallway bench. All those letters, she said. The photos. The address from the base. All real, I said. My father rubbed his face with both hands. I should have called the base, he muttered. I should have driven down there myself. Yes, I said gently. You should have. A long silence filled the hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed. Footsteps echoed and faded. My mother looked up at me. You have a daughter. Lily. She's 5. Her name caught in my mother's throat. Lily. Before either of them could say more, the hearing resumed. We went back inside. But something had already shifted in the room, not in the proceedings. In the air between my parents and me, 9 years of concrete had cracked, and underneath it, something fragile and green was trying to push through. The hearing concluded that afternoon. Kyle was found responsible for failing to execute required safety protocols. The consequences were significant: reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, suspension from guard duty, and a formal reprimand that would follow his record permanently. Not prison, but a career ended. Kyle accepted the findings without protest. He stood, nodded once at the investigating officer, and walked out of the room. In the hallway, the 4 of us ended up standing in the same stretch of corridor. Kyle saw me with our parents and stopped walking. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father turned to him. Why? Kyle didn't pretend to misunderstand. He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous gesture he'd had since we were kids. When Megan left for basic, he said slowly, you guys talked about her all the time. How brave she was. How proud you were. He paused. Nobody was saying that about me anymore. My mother frowned. You were our son. We loved you both. Kyle shook his head. You loved us both. But you admired her. And I couldn't handle it. The honesty was brutal. 9 years of silence suddenly made terrible simple sense. I meant to fix it, Kyle said quietly. I told myself I'd tell you the truth after a few months. But then months became a year. A year became 3. And every year it got harder to admit what I'd done. My father's voice was barely above a whisper. 9 years, Kyle. Kyle nodded. I know. My mother wiped her eyes. She sent us photos of our granddaughter. We never responded. Kyle looked at the floor. I know that too. The hallway went quiet again. An officer passed us with a polite nod and kept walking. I looked at my brother. I studied his face. The exhaustion. The shame. The strange relief of someone who had carried a lie so long that putting it down felt like collapsing. I believe you're sorry, I said. He looked up. But it's going to take more than sorry. He nodded slowly. I know. My mother stood from the bench. Could we come see you? She asked. Meet Lily? The question surprised me. Not because I didn't expect it, but because hearing my daughter's name in my mother's voice felt strange. Like hearing a song from your childhood played in a different key. I thought about Lily at home, her curiosity, her openness, the way she asks questions about everything and accepts the answers without judgment. Children don't carry grudges the way adults do. She'd like that, I said. 3 weeks later, my parents drove to Fort Stewart. Ryan made pulled pork on the grill. Lily was riding her bike in the driveway when their car pulled in. She looked at me. Are those the grandparents? Yes. She tilted her head the way she does when she's thinking hard. How come I never met them before? I crouched down beside her. That's a long story, baby, but they're here now. She considered this carefully. Then she said, okay, and rode her bike toward the car. My parents stepped out slowly. My mother pressed a hand to her chest when she saw Lily. She looks just like you, she said. Lily parked her bike and walked over. She stuck her hand out like she was meeting a general. Hi, I'm Lily. I'm 5.5. My father bent down stiffly. His voice cracked. Hi, Lily. I'm your grandpa. She studied him for a moment. Then she smiled. You have big hands. Do you fix things? He laughed. It was the first time I'd heard my father laugh in 9 years. I do, he said. I fix things. Lily nodded approvingly. Good. Because Mommy's bike has a weird noise. Ryan walked over with a plate of food. Welcome, he said simply. And just like that, the afternoon began. Conversations started small. Weather, Lily's school, Ryan's helicopter stories that Lily insisted on narrating with sound effects. But underneath the small talk, something bigger was happening. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. Something more like thawing. Before they left that evening, my father walked to his truck and came back carrying a shoebox. He handed it to me without a word. Inside were 9 years of unopened envelopes. Every letter I had ever sent, every photo, the invitation to my wedding, the picture of Lily in her yellow blanket. I couldn't throw them away, he said quietly. Even when I believed you'd left the army. I just kept them in the closet. I stared at the box. 9 years of reaching out, packed into cardboard. Why didn't you open them? I asked. He looked away. Because if I opened them, I might have found out I was wrong, and I wasn't ready for that. There it was. Not cruelty, not indifference. Pride. The same pride that built our family and quietly broke it apart. That was 7 months ago. Life is quieter now. Not perfect, quiet and honest, which is better. My parents visit once a month. My mother brings peach cobbler. My father helped Ryan fix the fence in the backyard and spent 2 hours explaining the correct way to set a post, which Ryan tolerated with the patience of a man who has landed helicopters in sandstorms. Kyle visits less. He moved back to Ridgewood after losing his guard position and found work managing a construction supply warehouse. We talk on the phone sometimes. Short conversations. Neither of us rushes it. Healing doesn't follow a schedule. Last month, I was promoted again. Another ceremony, another set of insignia. Ryan stood beside me. Lily sat in the front row and clapped before anyone else did. But there were 2 new faces in the audience. My parents. My mother held her phone up sideways, recording everything. My father sat very straight, watching the ceremony like it was the most important thing he had ever witnessed. After the pins were placed, my father walked up and shook my hand. His grip was firm, and his eyes were wet. I'm proud of you, he said. The same words he used to say about Kyle. But this time, he was saying them to me. And this time, they landed differently. Heavier. Truer. That night, after the guests left and Lily was asleep, I stood on our back porch. The air was warm and still. The neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and stopped. I thought about the road that brought me here. A lie told in a kitchen in Ridgewood. A door that closed when I was 19. 9 years of silence. And one hearing room where the truth finally walked in wearing everything it had earned. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about those years. The honest answer is no. Anger is heavy. I carried enough weight on those medevac flights. What I learned instead is simpler than anger, and harder than forgiveness. Families don't always break because people stop loving each other. Sometimes they break because someone is too proud to make one phone call. Too proud to open one letter. Too proud to admit they might have believed the wrong person. My father could have called Fort Jackson. My mother could have opened those envelopes. Kyle could have told the truth any one of 1,000 mornings. Our story would have been completely different. But life doesn't hand you the timing you want. It hands you the moment you're in. And what you do with that moment is the only thing that matters. If this story stayed with you tonight, do something small. Call someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Ask the question you've been avoiding. Listen to the answer, even if it's hard. Because a lie only needs silence to survive. But the truth only needs one person brave enough to say it out loud. Thank you for listening.